Hi, everybody. It's Anjanette. You know me from Kitchen Chats with my girlfriend Karen. And today I'm here for a different reason. I'm going to be hosting a TV show, Phoenix, Healing from the Inside Out. And I've been interviewing a lot of different people for the message I'm trying to get across to the public. So I've been in healthcare a really long time, and I see a lot of people trying to treat parts of people. And the message I really want people to see is that we are all of those parts. So empathy, compassion, they're very important out there. As a nurse, I don't get to decide who I treat, whether they have hypertension or mental illness or anything like that. I treat the whole person. That's how I have always been, and that's what I see. And it is my vision that people will see that whole person. There's a lot of stigmas out there today. I'm really trying to be the change I want to see in the world. So I don't know if this is going to align with who you are, but this is very in alignment with who I am. And in the course of me talking to people, I had the distinct pleasure of meeting our guest today, and his name is Dale Walsh. So I just want to tell you a little bit about his background. First of all, he's an author, so you might want to pick up one of his books, and all those links will be shared with you. But I wanted to give my audience a full perspective of the person. So I did interview people that suffered with anxiety and depression and schizophrenia. So Dale's going to tell you a little bit more about yourself. I'm going to ask him some questions so we can pull them out, and I hope you enjoy our show. So this is Dale Walsh, and again, I'm Anjanette. So hi, Dale. How are you? Say hello to our nice people.
Hi, Andra. Ned, thank you very much for having me. Thank you, everybody who's attending, and I hope I can be enlightening or at least interesting and insightful. So it's great to be here.
Okay, that's wonderful, Dale, and I know that your message is going to be a great one. So in the course of our conversation, we had spoken about what it was like being diagnosed with schizophrenia, some of the troubles that you had dealt with, and now you're out there trying to help families that are dealing with people, children, and family members that have schizophrenia so that they can learn how to cope with the diagnosis and the transition and the help that they can get. So a lot of the medical community believes in just medicating people. I don't believe that's always the answer, and I think it should be left to the individual. For you, that was the right decision. So could you tell me a little bit more about that, what that was like for you from your point of view, being diagnosed, then trying to find that answer, and what you're doing now, because I think it's amazing.
Well, if I could go back a little bit and just give a little bit of my story as some background, because I think that's important if we're going to talk about medication. And I feel that I've been very blessed to have found my medication very early on, and I think that's like a foundational corner of my recovery. But a lot of people have trouble finding the right medication, and but let me get started at the beginning. So in 1975, I was a freshman at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, and I had a very successful academic freshman year. I had like a B plus, A minus average in upper level courses, and but I was like doing a lot of drugs. I was doing marijuana every day. I was doing hallucinogenics and like mescaline and LSD. I never really got into cocaine, but basically I did everything else. And I always drew the line in heroin, of course. So, but I was doing very, very strong Ivy League marijuana every day. So I went to the summer after my freshman year. I continued with my education, and basically I reached a tipping point where I fell into schizophrenic delusion. I was walking around campus telling everybody what I thought was a great joke, which was, "Hi, I'm God," and then I would see how long it was before I burst into hysterical laughter, because how could God be 5'8"? So I really it really started as a joke, but fortunately or unfortunately, authority didn't take it that way, and So one Tuesday I was a successful, fairly Ivy League student, and the next Tuesday I was in a mental hospital in New York City, where I stayed for 13 weeks and was given drugs. I was given Thorazine. I was given like the highest dosage of Thorazine, the highest recommended dosage of Thorazine, and so I was in the hospital for 13 weeks, and that was my introduction to psychiatry and the whole psychological field. My mother had been dealing with it for a long time, but ultimately it was so I came to a program in New Jersey, private psychiatric program in New Jersey, for 5 years. I got out of there. I got my own apartment, and I went back to Fairleigh Dickinson University and graduated magna cum laude in 1985 with a degree in English. And then I began sort of semi-entrepreneurial career as a freelance tutor for Fairleigh Dickinson students. I would help them write papers and help them in all subjects except the hard sciences. And then basically I finished that, and I got a little burned out from that. So basically for a long time I was just like drinking beer and smoking pot and hanging out with friends. And so that ended in 2007 when I made a secret vow to my mother never to do marijuana or beer or any drugs, illegal drugs anymore. And so about 5 years ago, I felt that I was like well on my path to recovery. I mean, I was hospitalized 15 times between 1975 and 1993. And I've been basically out of the hospital. I had like 2 very minor hospitalizations, but that was a problem with medication. So basically I've been episode free for 30 years, although I had like 15 episodes before that. But one thing I'm proud to say, Andra, is I say I was admitted to the hospital 15 times and I got out 15 times. So that I was never like put on long-term institutionalization, and so about 5 years ago I came up with an idea. Thinking about my history and everything, I thought about how I'd like caused my parents such pain, my family, and it caused a lot of friction within my family, and also just like the pain. My mother, she felt guilty because she had like a mental illness diagnosis, and so she blamed herself and everything. So I came up with this idea of like being a mentor, using my experiences with the illness and with the system to become a mentor for the family caregivers of those with schizophrenia. So that's what I'm working on today. I've come up with a coherent program. It's called Live Love. It's 8 steps, and that's basically. So I'm trying to build that business now and really like just give back and help people benefit from the knowledge that I've gained about myself.
I think that's amazing. So on our call, we had talked about a lot of stigmas around mental health. And I told you that a lot of people, when anybody turns on the channels today, you see a lot of things on the news about people killing people and stuff like that. And then they say, well, they had a mental health diagnosis. And I don't think that there should be a correlation between someone having illegal behaviors and mental health. I don't think the two of them go together. And I think people are using that very liberally as an excuse for bad behavior. Bad behavior is bad behavior. But you had shared with me that the mental health population is at almost a 50% higher rate of being accosted and robbed and victimized than everyday people, which I found astonishing. And I'm sure that a lot of people don't realize that because of all the stigmas that they are really victimized in so many ways. And I wanted to draw attention to that because even if someone's not physically abusing them, the fact that they are such a stigmatized population is abusive in a lot of ways, because like Dale and myself, I mean, I just want to be seen as Andronette, whoever I am. I was that child. You know, Dale, I don't know if I shared this with you, but I grew up um with a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety, and there wasn't really any help available to me. Their idea of help was really to give me a pill, and it was probably because of a lot of things that were going on in my body. But I find that a lot of doctors do that today, and I know that I wasn't so quick, I'm sorry, to really share that information because of all the stigma around it, you know. So it's gotten a little better, but I think that we have a long way to go, because you're proof that people are productive in a society when they're loved and nurtured, that, you know, you're an active, productive part of our society. You've gone on to be an author, and now you've taken that experience and you're trying to turn it into something beautiful to help other families that suffered through what you went through. And that's a very selfless act. So I wanted to bring recognition to that. I know that as people that we have an emotional part and we have a physical part, and then we have that spiritual part, and then there's that mental health component. So we are essentially all of those people wrapped into one. And I think if people don't like a certain behavior or a characteristic, they refer back to that part that they might not like instead of that person. That's when those stigmas come out. And I really would like to advocate today for people really looking at the whole person and addressing that person, because Dale has a very emotional part, and he has emotional intelligence, and he's probably spiritual in his own way. If he's gone through programs for drug addiction, I'm sure there's a spiritual component to that. At least there was in mine. But you know, it's whatever everybody chooses it to be. But I wanted to share a little bit more about what you're doing and how you want to help people. What made you decide to take your knowledge and share it with other people in that way?
Because really, well, first off, let me just say, I was never treated for addiction. I did pot and beer for a long time, but ultimately I stopped and everything. But ultimately, I always said my problem isn't my substance abuse, it's my schizophrenia. So I just wanted to, you know, make that clear. But what the reason I wanted to, I'm doing Do Live Love is I feel I'm in a unique position to help, because when someone is diagnosed with schizophrenia, it's like a tidal wave of like overwhelm and everything for the families. It's like there's no way to prepare for something like that. I mean, even if you see like someone slipping in schizophrenia, if they, you know, after their first hospitalization, there's no way, there's no guidance, you know. And I call my clients the forgotten victims of mental illness, because ultimately, you know, the patient, the person with the illness, you know, I'm sort of like reluctant to use that word, but we'll just use it for ease. The person with the illness usually has like a doctor and a social worker or psychologist or someone to help him, guide him through the illness and hopefully to get better. But the family members, not only are they like totally befuddled or in despair because of what's going on, but they can't even get information in a lot of cases about their loved one because of the HIPAA laws, you know, and privacy and the privacy of the patient and everything. So basically, I just feel that, you know, I've experienced like the whole spectrum of like schizophrenic symptoms and everything. And I just felt that like my experience is like an invaluable gift that I can give to the world. You know, I mean, it's basically a calling from God. I mean, I look back on my illness, you know, and rather than say, why did I get this, and be a victim and say, you know, what happened to me? You know, what did the universe do to me? I look at it now as saying, well, basically, I was like predestined to get this. The reason I came to Earth in the first place was to get this illness so that I could get wise enough and get through it enough to be able to do what I'm doing now with the families and help really like make an impact and not only change the families that I'm working with, but get on the public forum and deconstruct that stigma, not only about schizophrenia, but also mental illness. Because what you said is true. I mean, people, whenever there's a mass shooting or anything, the first thing people say, what did he have a diagnosis? Why was he given the right to a gun and all these other things? But it's actually a matter of the chicken and the egg. Which came first, the desire to kill people or the mental illness? And I think this is an important statistic to emphasize is that people with a mental illness are 50% more likely to have violence done to them than to do violence. Because I don't want to generalize too much, but ultimately mental illness has a tendency to like make you more docile. Yeah, I mean, and what happens is if you don't get the help you need, then paranoia can turn into anger and everything. But if you're being being like treated and everything, it's very unlikely that you're going to do anything that's blatantly antisocial, like take a AK-47 and shoot 20 people.
I think that you also mentioned something in there that's important to look at too, because what did come first, the mental health issue or the violence? So why is it that they slipped through the cracks and they didn't, I said the cracks, the cracks, and they didn't get that help, that help wasn't available to them. So a lot of people still don't have basic health care in our system today. And how do they get on medication and get that help when they don't have access to the system because it's broken? So that's another component of that too. So people need to accept that blame, because we've created a system that is essentially broken, and a lot of people are slipping through those cracks and not getting the help that they need and they're richly deserving of. So it's very easy to identify a problem, but we need to start looking at better solutions. And certainly dropping stigmatism would be one of the easiest things to do. So I think that the more that people come and speak out about this unfairness, because it is unfair to treat somebody different because a disease or a diagnosis. Because I want to be very clear here. Nobody asks. He's very loving, and I was so proud of you when you said, this is my destiny. Because he could take this a very different path. He could be angry. He could be one of those people that said, "Why me?" But he's not. He's taking his experiences and he's turning that around into something that can help someone else, and that's a beautiful thing. I don't know if it's Tony Robinson or Dean Graziosi that says life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you, because I've worked with both of them in the same program. So right. I don't remember which one it was, but I believe it was Tony, but it's true, and a lot of us don't see that. It's very easy to sit in the pity part and give up and not get that help. But you fought for your help and you did what you needed to do to be the productive person that you are today. And you take total responsibility, which I applaud for. You said you put your mom through a lot of stuff and you accept responsibility for that. And because of that, you're now trying to help other people maybe learn something so they don't have to make those mistakes. And that's a beautiful thing. But I do want to talk about your other parts because okay. I don't want to be guilty of what I'm, complaining about. So you've always had an interest in writing and you are a published author. So you've been putting yourself out there. You didn't go through a publisher or anyone like that. You just said, this is what I want to do. Let me put my thoughts out there. So can you tell me a little bit about your books?
Sure. Well, actually, I've had two phases in my writing career. One is before graduated from Fairleigh Dickinson, when I wrote 6 novels. I call them future fantasies because I'm an English major. I'm not a scientist, so I don't call them science fiction. I call them future fantasies. But they have all these trappings of science fiction, like starships and nuclear wars, and But basically, so I call this my bestseller for the 20th century, which I still haven't published. Is called Velvet Velours Follies Book 2, or The Flight of the Dialina, which is my spaceship. So so that's a part of a trilogy that I wrote, and so I did that before I graduated from college. And then when I did graduate from college, I turned my focus completely to poetry. And I meant they say that you have to do 10,000 hours of practice before you become a master, and I feel that I've really done that. I have a archive of at this point like 4,500 poems.
Wow.
I put out 5 collections on Amazon. And let me just say about Amazon is that, if you have the desire to become an author, it's never been easier. I mean, with the internet and Amazon and everything, Amazon has its own self-publishing wing called Kindle Direct Publishing. And
KDP.
yeah, and you can, but the ability of people to make an impact and to grow themselves through their own writings and everything. I mean, so many people get stopped from writing because they say, well, I'll never get published. But actually that's where like counterproductive, because the journey of writing itself is the goal. I mean, that's why I've never like really tried to get my novels published or anything. I mean, I think they're great novels, and I think they could contribute to the wealth of literature. But ultimately, I didn't do it for fame or anything. I did it because it was like I felt an inner compulsion to write. And I think I told you, Andra, that I decided on my 10th birthday I was going to be a writer. And I say one of the ironies of my illness is it gave me the ability to become the writer I always wanted to be, because I've been very fortunate. I thank God for like the resources my family had and everything. But ultimately, I got out of the quote rat race through my illness so that I could dedicate myself to my writing. And one thing I always bear in mind is, is the saying, even if you get out of the rat race, you're still a rat.
Listen, if you could tell America anything, that I mean, in your dealings with people on a day-to-day basis, do you feel like you were treated differently because of your disease process?
Because of my what process?
Well, disease process is
Oh, well, I think there's always like a part of me that's sort of like detached, and observing and everything. And, I used to like, I would meet people, and within like 5 minutes of meeting people, I'd say, hi, I'm Dale, I'm a schizophrenic. And, that's very rare. But, I drove away a lot of people, I feel, because by doing that. But, ultimately the people who, wanted to stay with me and wanted to get to know me, knew I was a schizophrenic, but it didn't matter because they wanted to know me rather than the schizophrenic or the sick person or anything. And one thing that I deal with in my practice is the question of identity, and how how the person's perception of himself or herself defines who they are. So instead, I mean, and this is something I still work on, but it took me a long time to like get out of that mindset of I'm a schizophrenia instead of switching to the mindset of I'm a person with schizophrenia. And the mindset is completely different, because ultimately, when you say you're schizophrenic, then you're making that your entire 100% identity, as opposed to saying I'm a person with schizophrenia. That leaves a lot of room for other accomplishments and other growth and everything. So so the question of identity is something that I really work on in my work, which is building. I focus on my clients rather than on their loved one, because I think that if you can like transform yourself, or if I can help transform you, where you're much more positive and seeing yourself in a much better light, trying to help your loved one is going to be a lot easier. Plus, I teach like communication processes and everything. But ultimately, the goal is to make the person, rather than codependent, independent with and helping, rather than codependent and having to help their loved one. And that brings in like a much greater potential for love, compassion, understanding. And I mean that's what I was talking about earlier about, people just don't know how to deal with schizophrenia. It can be very like enigmatic, for someone who's trying to like understand what their loved one is going through. But I remember one of my friends once said, nobody realizes the pain of mental illness, and until you've gone through it and ultimately, hopefully, overcome it, then you aren't going to be able to really understand the foundation of what your loved one is going through. But that's why I started my business, is to be able to like help people understand not only the symptomology but also the thinking and the mindset. I never hallucinated, Andra, but I did have like delusion, for serious delusions of being God for 10 years. And ultimately it was like
Dale, quite honestly, we got a lot of people out there that have that God complex, and they're not locking them up, and maybe they need to be behind bars. So,
well, my point about delusion is, a delusion isn't just like one or two thoughts. It's a whole paradigm of thought systems that has to be dismantled in order for the person to get better. And I had an experience that like made me realize how absurd and actually, like sick it was to say I was God for so long. But but that's it was an event where I saw the world incinerated in a thermonuclear holocaust. I saw the whole earth like destroyed in a thermonuclear holocaust. And that was basically, my wake-up call to say, if you insist on saying you're God, you're going to lead people to a destruction that you don't want. So ultimately, my point about delusion is, it's not just one or two thoughts. It's like a whole thought belief system that has to be, rather than attacking the castle with a battering ram and trying to knock down the gate, is like a matter of like little hits, little hits, like just knocking away the brick wall that's keeping your loved one separated from you.
Dale, how do you help somebody with identity crisis when every day they're going out and people are seeing them as the very person they're trying to stand up against? So you said, because I think this is very helpful. I'm asking because out of curiosity. I'm not trying to badger you here, but a lot of times when people are dealing with identity crisis or role confusion, they're stuck in a place that they feel that they're not good enough, or so you said you were being seen as the schizophrenic and not a person with schizophrenia. So now you identify as a person with schizophrenia. That schizophrenic is not your whole identity, but in a world where they're still stigmatizing, how do you stand up and be who you are and get celebrated for Dave Walsh instead of the schizophrenic? Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think the real secret is self-awareness. I don't know if you know the word agnosia. but agnosognosia is a concept that's like talked about extensively in this Dr. Javier Amador. He wrote a book called "I'm Not Sick and I Don't Need Help," and it was like how he came to terms with his brother's schizophrenia. So, but basically, they prove that 50% of those with mental illness suffer from agnosognosia, which is a term taken from neurology for stroke victims, where the person with the illness can't conceive that there's something wrong. So 50%
That
of
part of their brain is shut off,
what is
usually by the stroke.
well, we're talking about psychological here, but it's a term borrowed from neurology, but it's been applied to psychiatry. But ultimately, he says that 50% of people suffer from agnosognosia, which means that they aren't open to treatment, they aren't going to be medication compliant, and they think that nothing's wrong and that everybody else is crazy. So, rather than like say, well, you're the crazy one to them. I mean, one thing I teach is a reaction versus response, and just not jumping to the first conclusion when someone is confrontational, but just taking a second or two to like take a breath and say, okay. So, for instance, if a schizophrenic says to you, I don't know if you have any children, but if you had a schizophrenic child and he said, "You're not my mother," I mean that's the natural reaction is, of course I'm your mother. How can you even say that? How can you even think that? But if you respond, you say, "Why do you say that? That hurts me a lot. Why do you think I'm not your mother? Because everything I've done for you is a sign of my motherly love for you." And that like takes the argument, and that takes the confrontation out of the conversation. And schizophrenics can be very confrontational. Sometimes to get attention for whatever reason they do it, whether it's to get attention or because they believe what they're saying or whatever. But if you respond, then you're much more likely to be able to start a dialogue rather than just lead into more and more intensive arguments where you think you're right and your loved one is psychotic, and he thinks that he's right, and he thinks you're the one who's psychotic. So
That could be problematic.
right. But so ultimately the goal is to become self-aware and to get out of that. I mean, when I saw the world, incinerated in a thermonuclear holocaust, that was the end of my agnosognosia, because I realized how delusional I'd been for the last 10 years. I mean, this happened 10 years into my recovery. And actually, I became a different personality for the next 30 years until Dale, the original personality, came back from wherever he went and reclaimed his body. But ultimately, I just feel it's self-awareness and attitude of love, compassion, empathy, faith, and patience are the basic needs for dealing with schizophrenia, with a loved one with schizophrenia. I'm not going to say schizophrenic loved one. I'm a loved one with schizophrenia.
I don't think that's so much to ask. I think that's what most of the population wants, to be loved and appreciated for who they are and to be valued as a person. Can I ask you what it was like for you when you got that diagnosed? If it's difficult to talk about, but your first time hearing, you're a schizophrenic, what went through your mind?
Well, actually, that's an interesting story, Andra, because as I said, they didn't tell me in the hospital when I was first hospitalized. They don't tell you like what your diagnosis is. And actually, when I came to my program in New Jersey, it was right under the direction of one doctor who like did everything, sessions, and his wife cooked meals, and it was like anywhere from like 12 to 18 young adolescents to young adults, and he like did everything, but he called my illness psychotic bliss because he said, you're too happy. I mean, that's what people always used to tell me. They say, you got to be more detached. You can't be so happy. How can you? And it's like, this was an outgrowth of my God delusions, obviously, but I mean, there have been times when I've been like in a despair that's way beyond the desire for suicide. It's just like a total hopelessness, and especially after my vision, it took me like 2 years to recover from the vision, and also, but the immediate effect was I was hospitalized, and I was just like in total darkness. It was like total despair. But ultimately, the goal is to I got a little sidetracked. What's the question again? I'm sorry.
It's okay. I wanted to know what it was like for you when you got that diagnosis, because you knew it was going to be a long road, that any mental illness is never a quick fix. It's either involves some real tough work with a medical practitioner, or going through changes with medications, because you had mentioned something very early on that was also important too. Not every medication works for everybody. So sometimes you have to be put on a medication and then weaned off and start a new one until they find the right cocktail, I guess, to really treat the symptoms. So I mean, hearing, hey Dale, you're a schizophrenic, what did that feel like for you in that moment?
That's the point I was getting to. I just like got lost for a sec. But basically, so my doctor said I was suffering from psychotic bliss, and he hospitalized me 9 times because, I would be like in such intense emotional capacity that, that I would be driving everybody else crazy. And he couldn't put in the whole program in the hospital, so he put me in the hospital, and like just everybody would detox for 2 to 6 weeks. But the point I'm making is it wasn't until 7 years into my illness that when I applied for Social Security disability, that I actually found out that my diagnosis was paranoid schizophrenic schizoaffective. So for the first 7 years, I knew I was like being treated for something, but I didn't know like the official diagnosis. So
Wow.
my diagnosis was psychotic bliss. You got to calm down, Dale. You can't be this happy all the time. And I thank God for the sense of humor he gave me, because I think that's a very important component, not only in caregivers but also in the patients, is the ability to like get out of yourself enough to like laugh at what you're going through. And I meant, at the beginning, as I said, I meant "Hi, I'm God" as a joke. I really, when the campus cops came and took me to the infirmary, I thought they were going to take me to meet the president of the university, because I'd figured out I was God. So instead, they came to me and they said, "Are you Dale?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Would you come with us?" And I said, "Sure." So I figured they were going to take me to meet the president of the university, and instead they took me to the infirmary, where I was interrogated for the next 4 hours by 4 sets of Ivy League psychiatrists, who then put me in a room, shot me full of drugs, and 3 days later I was in a mental hospital.
Wow. So Dale, I'm gonna close this out, but if you could tell America, I started saying this earlier, anything about how you'd like to see people treat future mental health patients, because there's always going to be people that suffer from mental illness and stuff. If you could impart anything on our audience today, what would that be? How you want to be treated?
Uh, Well, I think this is important for everybody. Treat everybody as a unique individual, and take them where they're at. Come understand them where they're at. I think that's extremely important, because everybody's at a different place in their life. And, I didn't realize how crazy I was, actually crazy I was for like 9 years, and I would get very upset, when people would say, you're still nuts and everything. But ultimately, everybody's a different place. And one of the people I follow is this retired psychiatrist named Dr. Bill Pettit, and he says a diagnosis is where you're at. It's not who you are. It's where you are rather than who you are. So, I think I'm a living testament to the fact that, no matter how dire things seem, there is a possibility of the recovery. And just keep that in mind, and, judge people as little as you can, and just enjoy their company. And if you feel they're distressed or need help, then help them so much as you can. Just give them love and compassion, and listen to them. And ultimately, the goal is not to cure them, because ultimately they have to cure themselves. They have to want to recover. They have to want to understand not only that they're sick in the first place, but also that they want to get better. And there's a big gap between mental and physical illness, because if somebody says I have cancer, for instance, people don't run away and say, oh no, you're going to shoot me or something, and that's really what I'm aiming to do, is change that national or world mindset where, where people jump to conclusions about what mental illness is all about, rather than just living in the moment and seeing what the person is doing.
Well, that's kind of why you're here today. We're trying to change the world one step at a time. So this is Andrea. We're going to sign off, but I wanted you to meet Dal because I'm forever changed after meeting him. I know that as people, we grow up with a certain type of belief or a concept, but we can change who we are and what we think at any time. So I'm asking you to really look inside yourself and start seeing people for who they are, how they show up that day in your experiences, and not by a label. So, I was asked to do something recently about labels and what do they mean. Labels shouldn't define who we are as people. They are just that. They're labels, things that you put on clothing items, but not things that you should put on people. I think as people, we need to be more compassionate and empathetic. Dal or anyone else that suffers from schizophrenia could be your family member. And would you treat them with love and compassion? So that's what I would like to impart on you today, to treat others the way you expect to be treated, and to treat them like you would treat your own family, and to ask questions. If a lot of people today are afraid because they don't understand, well, ask those questions. That's the only way you'll get those answers. So I'm Anjanette. This is Dale, and I'm glad that you hung out with us today and got to meet my special guest. And if you like what you hear here and like what you see here, please like, subscribe, and ring that bell. I will be leaving his information underneath this so you can get to know Dale a little bit better, some of his writings, where you can find them, and his website, and what he's doing in his professional life. Okay, so thank you guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.